Okay. So as I mentioned, in our project, there is an infrastructure folder, and inside of this infrastructure folder, there's a resource template project
Mm-hmm.
that contains the necessary ARM templates to build out a cluster. Now, I highly recommend to put everything in here, not just the cluster, but our VMs, our app services. So basically, we should have infrastructure as code methodology where we can spin up and update all our stuff in code, right? Make sense? Everybody on the same page here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
hey
right now,
Yuri.
let's spin up
Yuri,
a staging cluster. So all I
Yuri.
do is I'm just going to do staging. Full staging.
Yuri, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. What do we need to do to make that project? What do we need to install in Visual Studio to see that infrastructure project?
You still can't see it?
Correct.
Um, I think this is part of the cloud stuff because if I go here
All right,
and
because
you
I
go
just
to add new
yeah.
project, you
Okay.
should have in the cloud, this is it's called Azure Resource Group. So I think you need Azure CLI 1.7, I believe.
All right, because I have the cloud and I'm seeing the Azure Resource Group and the functions and all that, but it's still saying the project is incompatible.
So maybe your versioning is off of mine because mine is
Oh,
the latest.
actually, I just refreshed it, the project, and it showed up. Never
It showed
mind.
up.
Yeah, so
Great.
you need the cloud services
Cloud
in Visual
services. So
Studio.
this is
Yes,
something like an
yes,
add-on, right?
yep, exactly.
That's
Yep.
good to know. Yeah. So basically, what we're gonna be heavily using, actually, I already with Lee, we're gonna be using Azure Functions. We're gonna be using ServiceFabric applications. We will be using Resource Group. We are not using Cloud Service. We are not using Web Jobs. Okay. So let's go back to this. Now, once you're here, we're gonna deploy now to staging. So you're gonna basically and all these variables are. This is kind of the issue I'm having right now with targeting these parameters, which is this parameter file. So basically, a resource, an ARM. It's called ARM because ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager Template. Okay, and you have to be careful. You start Googling. There are two types of these managers. One is called Classic, Resource Manager Classic, which you don't want. And the other one, it's called um, Resource Manager, RM. So if you have like a PowerShell or something like this and you're running some of these PowerShell commands, for example, make sure that each command, for example, make sure when you're running this, you have the RM inside of the command. So if it does not have an RM, was confusing the hell out of me myself, but make sure the RM is called Resource Manager. That's the new one. If it doesn't have RM, that's the old classic model, which you don't have. But in our case, this is a new model. So that's an important distinction. Okay? So here you just
And like you really like how we will get to know like whether we have to which name we have to put. Right now we are putting staging, right? So let's say
yes.
I want to go for the development or the production.
So you see this parameter JSON file? So
Mm-hmm.
this will be part of the pipeline where this is going to get targeted the same way our other environment gets targeted, and these guys will be swapped out by the environment names from the environment. So technically, if it's all automated, if it's not, it really, Tushar, it does not matter what you put in there because
Mm-hmm.
these are just these names, right? When I talk about the actual ServiceFabric, it has its own DNS resolution. As long as it's something different that you can remember, it doesn't really matter what you put here. You see?
Okay.
Now, virtual network, I'm hard coding it. We're joining our VNet um, for database. And then storage, just staging, and that's it. Make sure I change here. Again, this just temporary.
The 2016 data center is the one that we already Azure on configured like that name.
That's the VM. That's the name of the image that's going to be deployed. When it's creating the cluster of the computers, it's going to put a 2016. This is the OS profile. So let me show you. Again, the ServiceFabric, the actual template, is like a programming language on its own, and I don't expect anybody to know it, but you can actually, you can actually do looping here and, you know, substitution and logic called PowerShell. It's kind of like MS Build, but a lot more advanced. But whenever you, whenever we're describing, basically this OS profile tells you what kind of computers are basically this cluster is composed on. You see the node type and the thing, and that's basically how you program from the parameter file. That's what you parameterize. So that's, you know, we can put 2012. We can create a Linux cluster. It doesn't really matter. Label name, post coordination. And okay, when you do that, you then right click on it and you say deploy.
It's stop.
Setting. I did Control Shift S. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see it again. So this file, would we save it with another name so that it's separate from the other template?
Yeah, it is different name. It's called ServiceFabric cluster.parameters.json, and the main template is called ServiceFabric cluster.json. There are two files. You see?
Yeah, but you just changed it for staging. What if we want to do like QA and other environments?
Yeah, so you can create multiple these files, and then whenever you deploy, you can select them.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah. So I'll show you. So like say right-click here, deploy, and let's deploy to. I'm going to create a different resource group for this, so it's easy to destroy it. So here I'm going to deploy this into its own resource. I'm going to deploy to its own resource group, and I'm going to call it post-core staging. And okay. So that's gonna create this. What this creates a resource group, and Justin, over here is where you pick the template parameter file. You see this?
Yep. Okay.
Again, I'm running 100 miles an hour, short circuiting here, but you know, the right way to do it is actually tokenize this parameter file like we're doing right now, and then replace the token on the release pipeline and inject what you need from the release variables. But we're not there yet. Not sure if we're going to get there, but this is it. Okay? Everybody good so far? Yes?
Yeah.
So this is new resource group. This is this deployment template, which basically drives how these resources will be created. And then this is what parameterizes this stuff. You can put all custom stuff here. Okay? And you press
so
deploy.
like each time do we have to create the new resource group, like if we require to deploy new?
Tushar, for production, we already have one resource group, which is called Post Coordination Resource Group. For QA and staging, I prefer to create a new resource group because then it's really easy to destroy this cluster if you don't need it. Because otherwise you have to go and clean up one resource by another resource, so write PowerShell template. Here I can just with a, I can just go to, so resource group is like the way you manage stuff here. So I can go, if I want to destroy this entire cluster, it's, so again, it's very important that the cluster is not just this pink ServiceFabric cluster thing here. Once it loads. Right here. So this is the cluster, but it has supporting storage accounts, it has an IP address, public IP address, has a load balancer. If you're destroying this, all this needs to go. So this is so easy. You say delete resource group, and then you put the coordination, you just have to put this coordination here, put it here, delete, it will wipe everything out nice and clean. Okay? So that is why we're creating a separate resource group so we can destroy it. Because at some point, we want to build them and destroy them as we go. Okay, so you say deploy.
So what was the name of the production one you mentioned? Because when 2.76.1 get released, that will be during my morning time. So I should have to mention that one as well when we're going to do the deployment.
Wait, repeat that again?
What is the deployment resource group name for the production deployment?
It's called pulse-cord. It is pulse.coordination. That's the resource group.
Pulse-coordination, right?
Yes, pulse-coordination. That contains our ServiceFabric that's running those QuickBook processor. It's running everything, and hopefully it'll run much more stuff for us.
Okay.
Now, if you want to, and let me show you. So right here, what you're looking for is template is valid. The way the deployment works is that this is just a JSON file. This is the set of instructions. It's basically a set of instructions that you're telling Azure to say, this is what I need to be done. You're not telling it how to do it. And one of the main reasons why you are encouraged to use Resource Manager against classic Resource Manager, because Azure did massive improvements in the Resource Manager in terms of parallelization of these resource creation. So before that, it would actually treat that file as a sequential step of instructions to create, like, okay, one VM, create this. Now it can analyze this ARM template and massively parallelize these resources. But bottom line is, you're looking for template is valid. Whenever this is deploying, this is the first thing. Then it deploys this set of instructions, and then it's just polling Azure to say, what have you done? What have you done? So basically, once you deploy, once you see this template is valid, if you want to see the process, you go here, you find your resource group, which is called cord staging or something we named. Let me know if you see it right here, pulse coordination staging. And you can see that it right there, this is what you're looking at. You say deployments. So there's one active deployment going on right now. You click on it, and it's telling you right here, I started the deployment. You can click on it, and you can see what is being done, what resources are being created, and where it's right now. So as you can see, it quickly created all the stuff, and then usually right here, primary, this is the virtual machine scale set. This is actually takes some time. It's spinning up resources to create these machines. So this might take 20 to 30 minutes. But once it's done, then we can deploy our code into this into that cluster. So let me pause right here. So this is not really what I was going to talk about, but this is kind of like what chat requested, how to do it manually. Let me pause and you guys ask me any questions, because starting, even like as of next week, you should be able to, any one of us should be able to do it ourselves, right? So that's why it's critical to ask questions now, so I can, Chad, do you have any questions?
I don't think he's online, dude.
He's not even online.
Nope.
Okay, so it's just us. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, so like this is like we have just done the deployment of the resource, right?
Right.
So so the next step will be like the do a deployment of the actual that services, right?
Right. Exactly. So it's a two-step process. You create the fabric, you create where the stuff is running, and then you deploy the stuff.
Okay,
Okay,
so how often do we have to do this? Like just once per environment and then it's done? And then, or what?
Well, technically, that's correct, except that unless you guys destroy this, so you don't have to pay money for it. So production, you don't have to do it because production is already there. Staging and QA, it depends on how you guys want to structure it. At first, Chad said that he wants it to be deployed. You know, you basically create it, use it, destroy it. Create it, use it, destroy
That
it.
was my only concern. When you have, that's all you have the storage accounts incorporated into that. So potentially, if we're storing anything in those storage accounts, that could be lost if we're tearing it down.
Justin, these storage accounts are supporting to the running of the infrastructure. If you need some kind of business storage accounts, that's your blob account that's not connected to this. You don't want to store anything to local temp storage or anything locally, you know? Yeah, so these storage accounts is to support the cluster. Okay, we're good? So now this is going to take a while, so we're going to be monitoring it. So let me talk about the Fabric API. So before, what were we using before? So you say, well, what Fabric API? We already like running it. We didn't have any questions. And let me show you what we come up with. So App Fabric, it consists of the Fabric solution, which you get by, as I showed you, we go to add.
Like that specific project is not loaded for me, that false coordination.
So that means you don't have the ServiceFabric SDK installed. So you need to install App ServiceFabric SDK.
Okay.
Because what you need to have is when you should be able to do add new project, and you should be able to click cloud, and you should have this little thing here, ServiceFabric application. You see this little orange thing?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have it, that means you don't have the API, the SDK. But once you have it, you have this main guy here, and under him you got all your microservices, right? At this point we have Doc Master Manager, Notification Processor, Persistent Entity Service, and QuickBook Processor Service. Okay. Now they are all part of this guy because you can click on him and you can look at the services and you can see what he's consisting of. You can see that he knows about all these four, right? Now, also he's got this manifest here that you can talk more information about. Sometimes you have to mess with it, but like I don't want to go into not this big of details. But let's look at each one of these guys. So let me see if I have my slides up. Okay, let me first. So each of these services, right, that we have, they have to be able to be reachable somehow, right? And so the way that we're doing is they're actually hosting an end service bus endpoint with this endpoint communication listener. And the way you do a custom endpoint is by inheriting from implementing this iCommunication listener endpoint, right? And basically the actual service, the way, like the window to the world is this method here. It said when you create a service instance listener, if you want to respond to the outside world, you're gonna basically return a list of how are you responding to the rest of the world. In this case, we have this custom endpoint communication listener, which hosts an endpoint. Okay, so this is a more general picture of how ServiceFabric is. All these nodes are talking. So basically, just to say, mention the way we're using our ServiceFabric right now is we're not using ServiceFabric APIs. We're just using it as a bunch of computers and we just deploy our code. Everybody good on that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that means that we're not actually using any kind of we're not calling into the apps fabric, we're not hooking in, we're not doing anything. We basically say you just deploy it and it just works magically. Okay? And I want to say, let's open up our eyes, and I'll show you the project, how we can leverage now the ServiceFabric API to do much more cool stuff. We still need an service bus, but because, again, these are different things. And service bus, it gives us service bus. A service bus is a way to connect different components, and so let me fast forward a lot. I'm going to fast forward a lot, and I'm going to show you what we have. So I had to read this 1,400-page book to even know what the hell we're talking about, but I'm saving you the details, but I want to get, there's some great pictures. And the one that I'm showing you is this. This is what we have right now. Okay, we are implementing competing consumers pattern. So what that is that this here is our service Azure Service Bus right here, right? Then messages get put on the on the Service Bus, and then you have all the nodes inside here. These are nodes of the Fabric. As soon as the message is put in here, by the way, Justin, you know what? Now I know what that forwarding topology is. Remember that forwarding topology on N Service Bus?
Yes.
That is this right here. I tested this, and I'll just give you an example. I tested this where I created a simple service fabric, simple demo, and all it does is when the message comes in, it just writes to a file with a number. That's all it's doing. And I deploy this. I logged into all those VMs, and I start watching. So I put a message, and this is the way we're doing it. So I wrote a message here in a loop. And so from 0 to 1,000. So it wrote, and a file would have, different things. And I would look at all these machines, and all of them were picking this up. Some of them would have number 1. This one would have number 12, number 13. So it's indeed ServiceFabric, and Service Bus forwarding topology is implemented this because MSMQ does not support this, but Azure Service Bus does support that ability where you put one message and you have as many workers here just all listening. So this is just from here, massive parallelism, Now you have to be a little bit careful is because, for example, with Lee, we can't quite do this because this has to be a stateful service, which kind of goes back to this goes back to API, what kind of services we can have. So let me pause here and you guys ask me questions. Well, what I'm saying is this is what we have right now, which is this stuff here is that picture.
Is that representing all one message? Like it's just different instances of that same message?
Okay.
Like
so what this
Yuri.
represents is each one of these guys, P, it would be like a QuickBook processor or notification processor service, right? Because if you look at the notification processor service, if you look at the actual service, all the business logic were handlers here because we did not use API at all. We did not use ServiceFabric API. We just did the old way, right? We're just using N Service Bus. Now I want to show you, point your attention to using API that's coming with a Fabric. So if you look inside of this notification processor service, this is one thing to look at. This is using API. You see the stateless service.
Right.
So what stateless service means is that you're going to have on each node, let's say this is 3-node cluster, but we have 5 nodes. So you have 5 of these P's. If you create your service, and how you create a service, you right click on this, you say add new service from Fabric service. See how you can select stateless service, stateful service, actor, guest executable, container, all the other stuff. but really these three are the most important ones. If you say stateless service, which by the way, I don't remember, did I create this infrastructure, all the projects, or did you guys create it? Like, do you guys remember? It doesn't matter, but I know that all of them are stateless services. A stateless service, when you create it, it just makes it inherit from stateless service. Now you are using ServiceFabric API. What that means is that that instance is going to be deployed to each one of these nodes, and it's going to be running on each one of those nodes, right?
So autosync and bulk import would be stateful services.
Exactly my point.
Okay.
Autosync and bulk import. Well, bulk import can be stateless because it just gets fired once, right? But but to be careful, to be safe, that will be stateful, so it will be running across all of these nodes. So basically, the idea here is not worry about machines. You worry about, scaling, right? You worry about where your stuff runs. Either you're gonna start, if it's stateless, that means no sharing, it's gonna be running across. And if it's stateful with autosync, it's gonna be running as a stateful service, and it's gonna be running across all these nodes. Exactly. That's a good observation. Right now, we just basically, Justin, we made them stateless. So when we deploy that, it just deploys itself to all these, and then it has a window to the world, and the window to the world is right here. This is how it's using endpoint communication listener. And endpoint communication listeners basically just says, hey, use this Azure Service Bus forwarding topology. So it just creates the links to Azure Service Bus, and that's it. And as soon as one message comes in, these guys all jump in and race to get this, to consume this message. And then once one of them wins, he consumes it. Then it goes to regular handler here, and then off you go with your logic.
Wasn't there a broker involved in that?
Yes, there is a service broker, but it's all behind the scenes. We don't have to worry about it.
Okay. So does the broker determine who gets the message?
Yes.
Which one of those nodes?
Azure Service Bus is the broker, and it's got all the what do you call it? All the glue and all the business that basically deals with this, and then it provides the API to deal to basically look at the sharding, look at the and so if you want to write the your own code that you want to introduce, you want to basically implement competing consumers, you need to interface with Azure Service Bus broker, right? And you need to keep count on what partition you are, or you can just use end service bus, and you can say forwarding topology. You just two lines and you're done. Mm-hmm. So this is how beautiful it is that, and I actually tested it. When we deployed this, I didn't know about all this, but I was not comfortable, so I actually tested this. Like I said, I deployed 5 of these guys, and all they do is message comes in, message has a number which generated in the loop, and then they just dump it on the file. I logged into all of them, and indeed, one of them had number 1, the other one had number 20, depending on who grabbed it, And I was refreshing real time, and I saw those numbers increasing. So this is how it's working. I tested it, which is beautiful. I mean, this is very deep because it gives us, because we can with that ARM template, we can scale this. Instead of 5 nodes, we can make it 100 nodes, right? Or we can make it 10 nodes, or we can make it 1 node. But all of this stuff is blissful and aware. Whenever you're pushing a message, let's say you're pushing a message that requires some kind of image computation or manipulation, you push it here, and then you can scale up your cluster to do this in parallel, and this is all behind the scenes. But this is not leveraging any. First of all, you guys have any questions? Are we good so far, right?
Yeah. So actually, one question, like Yuri. So you was mentioning like it can be like consumed by any of the nodes, right? So like if in terms of the persist service, like we want to go with the 1 by 1 only request, like if one
correct, Char. This is where we need to start taking some care. Right. So this is where this might not work, and we haven't ran into any issues, but we might need to tweak it a little bit, because I think persister service. Well, no, persister service is giving something to save, and he's saving it. So they can be running in parallel. It's still deploying. Let's go back to that picture. Did I close it? No. So again, persistent service. You're giving persistent service something to save right here. You got 5 instances distributed of persistent service running. They're not all gonna be doing it in parallel. Only one of them is gonna get it and it's gonna persist. You see? That's called competing consumer. Because there's a message broker which Azure Service Bus implements.
No, but only problem will be here that I got like any one of them is get okay. But let's say there are 2 messages come. One is for the consumer and then come for the work order. Okay, so let's say 2 instances get that 2 different messages. One is for the consumer and one is for the adding the work order, right? So one of them is failed, even though it has the previously already came the message for the customer. Because whenever work order will try to add the data, it will find the customer is not exited. And it will
what you're saying, Tushar. That's where you need to use API. And remember how we're going to do this with Saga. There needs to be coordination between the two. So it cannot be, for that reason, right? For that reason, this cannot be like this. It has to be a stateful service. It has to span all of them, and it has to handle the scenario. So we're missing that coordination part. I agree with you. If it was just blindly send a message and save it, you're scaling it. If right now what you're saying is we're missing the state, so this needs to be addressed. And that's what we're going to do with Sagas, but there's a better way now with this API. So yeah, I agree. So this is really fire and forget. If you have some kind of action, like for example, Web API is a great way. You can host Web API with this because it's a stateless. It's something you just basically, stateless thing. So let me...
for notification, it's perfect one because there we don't have any.
QuickBook processor, perfect. Persister, Doc Master Manager, perfect. Persister service has to be stateful service. Instead of stateless service, it has to be stateful service or an actor. I'm going to show you guys, and that's why we're talking about this. But right now, stateless service and competing consumers with ServiceFabric, it's a very, very powerful way to, to scale and do things, but, some things that cannot be done. Like autosync can be done and persister cannot be done right with it. So let me pause right here so yes, even we deployed, right? We use Fabric. We're not truly using it because we didn't really understand how it's working until recently. So we were not leveraging API. Okay? So now I am going to say, so we need both. The question is, well, can we do everything with Fabric? Can we do everything with Fabric and get rid of End Service Bus? That was my first question. And the answer is not. I mean, we can, but not really, because Service Bus, right, and microservices are different. They have different needs. You need Service Bus to do the communication integration, all these things. You need microservices and infrastructure to do microservices, right? So we are still going to be using both, right? So, but we're not going to be leveraging End Service Bus like Sagas or any kind of like a deep stateful stuff, because we're going to be using Fabric for that. But for the competing consumers and a broker, we're going to be using it because it's 2 lines of code and it's working beautifully. Okay? So now let me talk more about other stuff. So the other stuff is lifecycle. So how things work is this. So when you deploy your code, right, behind the scenes, there are nodes, there are computers, but we don't care about it. You're just deploying it and you're just telling it, hey, it's going to be a stateful, it's going to be stateless, or it's going to be an actor, right? So the way the ServiceFabric runtimes it, and you're creating a type. So and this is still deploying. Let me just double check. Oh, okay, succeeded. So Tushar, looks like it's created a cluster, but I don't want to derail the conversation. So we're going to deploy it right at the end. I have a couple of minutes here left, so let me just kind of go. So let me go to our production fabric. And the best way to get to it is, again, from resource groups. You know what? Let me make it easier. Let me actually, this left window is called a hub. I'm just going to display our fabric on the hub. You go here, and then you go to, see, now we have two of these guys running.
Mm-hmm.
You go here, and you go to Explorer. And let me show you something here. This application has pulse coordination type, which matches to pulse coordination, right? So what you're telling it, it's like object-oriented stuff, right? You create a class, and then the framework instantiates your class. This is the same thing here. You create a type, and then when it gets deployed, the fabric will actually instantiate your classes. You know, so the life cycle is like this. It's kind of like a pipeline in IIS, you know, back in old school, but it creates your instance, and it says it creates all the listeners. Remember, I was telling you guys about the listeners. To be a listener, all you have to do is on your service, you have to return something here. You see this? There's a method that's called create service instance listener, which is going to be called by the fabric. If you want your service to be just a background service that's just doing number crunching off of a queue, you don't return anything here and nobody can communicate with you, but you're doing work. You're like a background worker, you know? But if you want to respond, in our case, we are returning, hey, we say we are a listener and we're going to listen on the service bus via this end service bus endpoint communication listener. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yeah.
So, to be a listener, Fabric is gonna say, give me all the listeners, and he say, I'm gonna return here all my listener. So you can have end service bus listener, you have a custom listener, or you can have WCF listener, any kind of thing. You can have OWIN, API listener, HTTP, doesn't matter. And then it enters into the infinite loop, and basically it opens listeners, and then it runs this thing on the fabric, on the service called run async, with the cancellation token. It's basically, if something is shutting down, it's going to pass the cancellation token, and then basically you need to shut down. Then, yeah, let's not even worry about so talk about stateful services. So now this is stateless. Now if you're doing stateful, right, with stateful, basically stateful service, it spans across all, you see, across all of the nodes, and basically it has memory. So you can have, you know, and this is kind of the same idea as Hadoop. If you look at MapReduce and how Hadoop things was working, it's you bring the data where the computation is. So this is a lot different with a centralized database where the computation is done somewhere else, and then the data is living in the database, which is a single bottleneck. Here, you bring the data with you bring the data to the node itself, and I haven't even gotten to the actual demo. I'm still talking about it, but then also you can have even a next level up, which is actor theory. So an actor is, if you go here and right click and you say add new from template, add new service fabric service. You see, so I talked about stateless, I talked about stateful, and then there's also an actor service, which is a next level of generation. It basically leverages stateful services, but it is a level up from it. And basically what actor, this theory is from the 70s in computer science. This was developed in the 70s. Like Scala is using some of this. But basically the idea here is treat code as like people. For example, each person like is an individual entity, but if you put them in group, they create society and they do stuff. So in our case, actor is a piece of code that has notifications, that has right there. That's what it is. It's got code, it's got state, and it's got notification that other actors can communicate with, including itself. So finite state machines, easy with actors. Any kind of change tracking, easy with actors. Any kind of, even the current task that we have, we can do it in actors very easily. We don't need all this complexity, with tracking. I forgot what was, there was some task that could be easily done with this. Multi-threading, don't have to worry about it because each one of these actors create its own thread, and they build on top of the thread safe reliable collections, which there's a reliable dictionary and there's a reliable queue. Okay, so I know this is a lot of theory, but I have a demo app here, okay, which consists of, which is this, which is not as simple as it looks. So basically, and I don't have the time to, maybe I'll schedule, we will schedule some time tomorrow if there's general interest. But basically, this is a demo application that uses ServiceFabric API. It uses stateless services, uses stateful services, and uses actors to implement a very close to the real world scenario of the ordering system. So there's a web service that basically can submit an order. There's a customer order actor that can basically query the catalog, the inventory. If there is something on the, if there's items there, it's going to safely decrease the item, remove from stock. And then it can create a request to the restocker service. This is all like modeling it, but this restocker service is going to communicate with the restock actor that has a restock pipeline, basically, and each one of them. So it's a state machine, basically, finite state machine that different things, and it's completely scalable. Which in this case, and this is this app, and I pulled it straight from Microsoft. And of course understood it, but I pulled it straight from Microsoft code. But basically, it consists of the endpoint. So it's very similar to ours. It has an Angular API. Actually, it has an API and Angular front end. Then it has an ordering service. It's a web service. So web service right here is web service, which is a stateless service. Then web service talks to an actor, which is customer order actor, which is customer order actor right here. And customer order actor is right here, is an actor. And he has timeouts built in. So Justin, all the stuff with timeouts and all the stuff, it's basically built in here. And then it's also using a stateful services. So Lee, this is what we're going to use for the auto sync, which is customer order service. Let me look at the picture again. Customer order actor inventory service. Inventory service this here. And it implements stateful service, and it has state inside of it and run async. And then it has some more actors here. And then the best thing here is also it's implementing these reliable queues, which I'm going to talk about it. Even though they're all running in parallel, they're still thread safe because they are leveraging these things called reliable dictionaries and reliable queues, which are kind of like an immutable collections that they're thread safe. All right, let me stop here with this. We're gonna reconnect maybe tomorrow. And Tushar, let's go ahead and deploy the code. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna let you deploy the code from your branch, but I'm gonna show you how to do this.
Okay.
So the cluster is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to deploy the code, you would just go to here, post coordination, right click, say publish. Mm-hmm. And then select that cluster. That's simple. You want to select right here, post coordination staging. And you're going to, I don't think we're using these parameters, and then you're going to say publish, and this is going to publish the code.
Okay, and do we have to do any changes related to that or
Sorry, yeah. You gotta
related to
go
that?
into endpoint communication listener, and you're gonna change this endpoint here. I have a way to not hard code it. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have time to, but you're gonna have to go to each one of them and change this endpoint and service bus endpoint, and then the connection like the app config.
What is the endpoint?
The endpoint, each one of these services have a class called endpoint communication listener. Remember, that's the window to the outside world, and the very first line is called endpoint name. You need to change this to where the staging website is sending messages to. Justin will know it. I think it's called ServiceFabric Doc Master Manager QA or staging, something like this, right?
It'd be like issues QA or issues staging.
And then this one.
From where I can get that name, because tomorrow morning I will have to deploy that one. So
you get that by going to our Service Bus Explorer. You know what? You don't even have to do this. You can just go to you go to here, and you're gonna go to let me enable Service Bus.
I think we only have issues staging anymore, right? There's no more QA for issues because we don't have enough deployment slots.
Well, no, I'm talking about that one is a service bus slot.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it has to match the same endpoint we're using for the API, right? Or maybe not for some services, but for notification service.
Right. So we're using Tushar for the testing for all these environments. We're using MyTaskit Dev Standard Service Bus, and if you look on him, he's got those are the endpoints here, right here. ServiceFabric Notification Processor Enhancement Staging, ServiceFabric. So those are the endpoints that it's basically listening on.
Which one? Just my screen is refreshing.
So wherever the website and API, whatever they're sending it to, whatever the messages are going to, that is where you need to send it. So if you look at, for example, if you look at, Justin, can you help Tushar with that part?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy to match it. You just need to match it to where the website is sending it. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just going to be issue staging because we only have that one. Everything needs to be consistent from the services to the API and the app. So we only have that one deployment slot to deploy those, the app and the API. So I'm assuming it's just going to be always issue staging.
Correct. But yeah, we can work out these little details. But Tushar, so the thing to change is you have to change this endpoint name so you can receive on the correct endpoint, and then obviously the config files.
Okay, so that's something like Justin, can you do that, because tomorrow otherwise I will have to also still have to have a call with you to check with where right now we are mapping and all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I'll push. It's going to be the issues. Is this even in the issues branch?
2.76.1 need to be pushed on that our Azure one.
Okay. Yep. I can do it.
Okay. But tomorrow we might have a coordinator on one call, so I will just go through this one so I can do by myself from going forward. Okay. So.
Okay.
Well, Tushar, you can try to deploy stuff today. If you have any issues, you can reach out to me in terms of like deployment failing, but in terms of configuration, I think Justin would be a good person to.
Yeah, for deployment actually right now I have issue to load the project file itself, right after this we have the call with the chart, and by that time it will be 10:30 here.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so that's the only changes. You do the changes and then you publish from here. Publish, and then it will publish. That takes about 20 minutes, maybe longer.
But this time for tomorrow, like Justin, you will going to deploy, right? But then after.
Yeah, I'll deploy everything and test and make sure it's working.
Okay, and tomorrow we will coordinate and I will make sure that project is get loaded and I will try to deploy together along with you on that part to what changes we have to done on that part. Okay.
Okay.
Just for testing purpose, even though you have deployed, we will try to deploy together again.
Yep. Right. Got it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
All right, guys. So let's go ahead and cut here. I still want to show. I mean, these are the prereqs for the demo, and I want to go in details about the demo, or maybe it's a little bit generic with there's too much stuff going on. Maybe I'll just get with like Justin. No, maybe I'll get with Lee because we're gonna be implementing. He will be implementing the stateful service for app service, and then we can do a demo off of that. I think this is a little bit far. What do you guys think? Is it a little bit too far-fetched to do all this Microsoft demo that has all the stuff built in? Maybe we should do one at a time, or because I actually took the time and I think I understand how it works, but not 100% yet. But what do you guys think? What should we do?
So, what did you just said? Like what we have to do in next?
Well, my question is, I mean, I know Chad wanted me to, talk with the team, right? But so this is the first part. The second part, do we want to go over this code that like really has nothing to do with our application, or to understand how to use API? When I say use ServiceFabric API, I mean, okay, how do we use stateful, stateless, and how do they communicate between? Because I haven't shown you guys a different communication mechanism except Service Bus, because these guys can communicate between themselves natively, So okay, how about this? I'll schedule a talk. Go ahead.
Since we talked briefly about that, so I know what you're talking about, but the other guys, I think it's going to make more sense if you show it to them.
Okay, so tomorrow I'll schedule another demo, and I will show you simple stateful service and how to communicate with them, how they natively can find each other and communicate. And this is the stuff that Lee's going to be, he's going to be writing a stateful service, but he's not communicating with any other microservices from there. But yeah, I'll schedule another one for tomorrow. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
All right, bye.
Okay.